Hello there, fellow truth seekers. Doug Foster here again. Today, I want to talk about flat Earth. Is it true? We're, here at this channel. Our objective is to seek truth. Okay, and so we always like to start, of course, with Scripture to validate what we're talking about. Or to give you a foundation for the truth. One thing we have to understand is, what would be the purpose? I like to kind of, build a premises as to why people would lie about it. Why would they try to cover up how the earth really is? What would be the motivation for it? Well, I think it has to do with deception. Going back, all the way back to the time of Nimrod, or even around that time when the so-called the Anakim, or they call them the Anunnaki, and these entities, these Anakim, is what they were. They were Nephilim. Were telling these people that they come from somewhere else. They come from another planet, and that that they created them from monkeys or whatever primates that were already here, and they kept making newer and newer models of them, and they were mixing their DNA with these animals. And of course, there is some truth to this, that those fallen watchers that came down here and mated with human women in Genesis chapter 6, from that period, which was the time of Jared, the sixth from Adam, from that period to Noah's time, they were mixing animals and human beings. They were making chimeras and stuff, and altering the human genome, making all kind of fantastical creations. But these things were all abominations. They were not created by our true creator, Elohim. And so the idea, I believe, was to sow this idea that there is somebody that made us, but they just made us from evolved animals. And to get this little seed planted, and for it to kind of work its way down, and you also had people that contributed to this idea, and because I believe people like Pythagoras and a lot of those Greek philosophers, they studied a lot. I think they studied a lot of that stuff from over there in Mesopotamia. I mean, the Greeks were highly inquisitive, and they pretty much all like to think of themselves as philosophers or something, and debaters. So they would were closer to that period of time, even though it was 2,000 years earlier from the time of Pythagoras. He lived somewhere, between 570 and 595 BC. But so you figure, roughly 2,000 years before that, during the time of Nimrod and the tower, the Tower of Babel and all that stuff, that there was people that still were able to decipher that stuff over there, a lot of that stuff from that area, and they were still people that had already been living there. The people that live in the area of Iraq today. So they would have picked up on this stuff, because a lot of that stuff would have been still carried down. Even if it wasn't written down, it would have been carried down orally. Another thing is that these Anunnaki say, we came from the planet Nibiru, we came from somewhere else, and we traveled here, and we found these primates, and we created them, made them into a more advanced model by inserting some of our DNA, and we just kept doing this until we produced man. And we done it because we wanted to use y'all for, basically slave labor to mine gold. Well, first off, just think about this. If you're advanced, under the paradigm that we live in now, the heliocentric model of cosmology, which basically is saying that the sun is the center of everything, and that we live in this vast universe that is, trillions and trillions of miles to the nearest star. Anybody that would be sufficiently advanced enough to travel that distance to here, to the earth, and not just to travel here, but to find this place to begin with, would have to be, so advanced that they would not have to use other beings to mine mines. They could use automatons, robots, machines. We're doing it today. I mean, we're using automated mining machines and everything else that basically, humans just maintain these machines, and now there still is mining going on in real deep mines that is done by human beings, gold mines and stuff like that. But we're reaching a point to where, and I mean, even most of the mainstream science is saying that we're reaching what they call the singularity, which is a point where machines will be so smart that they'll be able to replace human beings at most tasks, including deep mining. But so you would sow this this story, because again, they didn't need some other beings to get down there and dig mines. I mean, they could, anybody that advanced would have had the technology to mine this stuff without the use of anything other than machines. But I think that they sowed that seed, and as time's gone on, people like Pythagoras and Aristotle and Plato have carried that kind of thing down. And Aristarchus of Samos, they believe he's the one that took some of what Pythagoras had said and made it into this heliocentric model. Now, the thing you have to understand about these people, Pythagoras and different ones, they were sun worshippers. They worshipped Apollo, the sun god. So these people were, to them, the sun was the center of everything. So in order to, and when you come down to to Copernicus's time, which he lived, I think it was from like 1473 to 1543. When you get down to him, he was a big follower of Pythagoras and these ancient Greek philosophers. And Hermes Trismegistus, this mystical figure there in ancient times. And you have to understand too, like Pythagoras believed in reincarnation. He believed that the soul was immortal. But according to the scriptures, our souls are not immortal. What we strive to attain to is immortality. Right now we're mortal. When we die, we are dead, and that's just all there is to it. But so you have to understand the way that these people believed, to kind of get the understanding of why they would want to create this sun-centered model. But not only that, I mean, if you look on down to the Romans, they were sun worshipers. They worshiped Mithra, the sun god. The same with the Egyptians, the Aten, sun worship. Under Akhenaten, they were worshiping the sun, and they called the sun the Aten. And so All throughout history, you see all these cultures, just about all of them, the sun tends to end up being the center of their worship. Now, they worship the other planets as well, the planets, and the word planet is mentioned in the Bible one time. But when you go and look up that word in the concordance or whatever, you'll find that it really means constellation. Why they put the word planet there, I don't know, because in the beginning, whenever the earth was, the heavens and the earth were created, it says nothing about planets. But the word planet actually comes from a word plantes, which means wandering stars. Okay, and over again, throughout Scripture, it always calls, basically, the angels are interchanged often with the word star. These stars and luminaries are either they are these entities or they are being controlled by these entities. They follow these courses that they are told to follow, because when we look there in Genesis 1, we're going to look at these scriptures. We'll look and we'll see where it says he placed the sun, the moon, and the stars inside of the firmament, and that they were to be for signs, for seasons, for days, and for years. It was for timekeeping. Because, you have to have something to judge and measure time by. You have to have a reference point. Because time is, ultimately is an infinite, can be an infinite number, because it goes on and on into infinity. But in order to have a way to measure time, you actually have to have some kind of a reference point to do that. So that's why he purposed to put those in there, and for them to follow these courses, so that they would be a means by which people would know when to sow crops, when it was time to breed your animals, when it was time to do different things. You could know by looking up at the heavens, and not only that, but they was the Matzaroth, the constellations. Of course, it's been corrupted by the pagans. They call it the zodiac, and they use it to try to predict the future. Well, it was never meant for that purpose. It was meant that when a certain constellation appeared, a certain event was going to take place. When it was in a certain kind of alignment, like in Revelation, where it talks about the woman with the 12 stars at her head and the moon over her shoulder, and the sun shining down on her, or the moon at her feet and the sun shining down on her. Well, at a certain point, when it was exactly in that right position, that was when the Messiah was born. And so it was a story being told in the stars. And, this is one of the things, and I'm just going to put this in there right at the beginning, about their heliocentric, globe, globular water ball spinning around, that the North Star is always in the same place. It never moves. Well, if the Earth is moving, spinning around, and then it's circling around the sun, and then all of that is moving too, in a direction, then it seems to me that over time the North Star will eventually move to a different position. But it's funny, it never does. It never has moved. It's been there as far back as people have been watching the sky, and it's never moved. Which would tell me that means that the Earth is stationary. It doesn't move. But just throwing that out there. But coming down to the time of Copernicus, he was a Catholic, probably a Jesuit. And if you notice, if you go start doing a little research about astronomers and astrophysicists, you'll find that a great majority of them are Jesuits, Roman Catholic Jesuits. And it was, because the Roman Catholic Church, up until the time of Copernicus, they held to the same flat Earth model that everybody did. You can go and again, I'm encouraging you to do some research. You want to get some good research on this. Go, Pastor Dean Odell. He's a pastor in Alabama down there, and he's done a whole lot of stuff on this, a lot of research. And Rob Skiba. Rob Skiba, of course, he's deceased, but he done a tremendous amount of work on this. And was at a lot of conferences around the world, speaking in front of large audiences about this, and bringing the proof is in, the old saying is, the proof is in the tasting of the pudding. He was doing this stuff, done it, and when he first started in it, and this is the way most of these people kind of got in it, he was trying to disprove it. He wasn't trying to prove flat Earth. He was trying to disprove the flat Earth cosmology, because he was big into like a lot of people, like me when I was younger. I used to fantasize when I was watching Star Trek when I was a kid. And I'm talking about the original Star Trek, watching it on TV, and I dream about flying the world's unknown, on the Enterprise, and seeking out new life and all that kind of stuff. Well, and in school, I was always fascinated by science and history and stuff like that. Wasn't much on spelling and English, but I was pretty good in the sciences and stuff. But anyway, so he was seeking to try to disprove this. But the more he researched it, the more he became convinced that the Earth was flat. And and when you begin to research words and stuff that, and look up the Hebrew, and by the way, there's another guy, Dr. Michael Heiser. I mentioned him on here before. Dr. Michael Heiser is a Hebraist. I mean, he's an expert in Hebrew and Hebrew history and Hebrew customs and traditions going way back. He researches the looks at, like Josephus and, the book of Enoch, and other books, Jasher and Jubilees and Esdras, and different books you can look at, and you can understand more about their customs and traditions and stuff like that in the ancient past. But also he's an expert like in the early versions of Hebrew, Paleo Hebrew, and even going back to the original Hebrew alphabet, the Odiot, which is their earliest and I believe the original writing system. I believe this is the original writing system that goes all the way back to the time of Enoch. Because Enoch was called the scribe. In the book of Enoch, he's called the scribe by the Malachim, or angels, that he interacted with. They said, "Why do you always want to know these things?" And he said, "Because I want to know. I want to know things. I want to write them down." He was always writing stuff down in books. And, it's believed that those books were handed down to his son Methuselah, and Methuselah to Lamech, and Lamech ultimately to Noah, and to try to preserve those books. But over time, and they probably still are in existence, but they probably fell into the wrong hands. Truth's known, they're probably in the archives over there at the Vatican. But there was some of them that managed to get out, like the Book of Enoch, and the Hebrew people may have had some of them. But Enoch was probably where the writing system began, and it was Hebrew. I believe the Hebrew language is the oldest language. Now, some people will say it could be Aramaic, but I don't think so. I think it's Hebrew, and Aramaic is a sister language, very similar to Hebrew. But it's not as complicated as Hebrew. Hebrew is kind of a tricky language. And I'm no expert in Hebrew by no means. I mean, I'd have to do my research on words and stuff like that, and I use a concordance. I mean, I use this concordance right here. And it's pretty exhaustive. gives you a whole lot and that's one of the things I want to introduce here today is words. You know, people act like the Hebrews didn't have certain words or something in their language. Well, they did. They had the same kind of words in their language as we do today to intimate stuff. Now, back to Dr. Michael Heiser. He founded a company called Logos Bible Software. And, it's one of these Bible softwares where you can go put a word in and it'll bring up a scripture or a chapter or, where it's located at, just like a concordance kind of thing. And it gives you the Hebrew and the Greek and different, and Aramaic, because some of it's Aramaic in the original writings. And he done a series on the flat earth cosmology based on the Hebrew understanding of cosmology based on Scripture. And he said that, what they believed was true. They believed in a flat earth, that the Scriptures, that's what it describes, and that, but that he didn't believe that personally, that he believes in the doctrine of accommodation, basically that God lied. Because they couldn't understand a globe, which is insane. I mean, and it's like I've said before, I believe people back then were probably more capable of understanding concepts than we are today. I think that, just because they didn't have rockets and computers and stuff doesn't mean they didn't have intelligence. And in fact, a lot of the intelligence and the ideas that we have today that make a lot of the things possible that we do was, come from those people. Again, people like Pythagoras, and I'm not going to give him a whole lot of credit, for anything particular, because he was a pagan and he was a sun worshiper. And he was part of promulgating this deception. But so Dr. Michael Heiser, he said, yeah, that's exactly what they say, and he even made a model himself of the description that it gives in Scripture. He made a model of it and of what it would look like if it was true. But a few other little tidbits of stuff I want to throw out there here initially. Now, according to the science, the Earth rotates at, let's see, let me get my little book here. I wrote down some notes. The Earth is curving, the curvature of the Earth is 8 inches per mile squared. Now, if you start doing the math on that, so every mile that it curves, the Earth curves 8 inches. It goes, so that you have a horizon, so to speak, to where after a while you can't see what's on the other side of that so-called curve. But a lot of that has been absolutely disproven. For example, up there in Michigan, people can see Chicago 53 miles away. I think it's 53 miles to the shores of Chicago there, from the shores of Lake Michigan, from the shores of Michigan to the shores of Illinois over there is 50 some miles. Well, according to this math, the buildings, the tallest building there, which is the Willis Tower, used to be the Sears Tower, would be something like 800 or 900 feet below the horizon. Okay, but yet people can see it. On a really clear day, they can see the lights over there at night, and they got, telescopes or whatever there along the shore to look out across the lake, and they can see the Chicago skyline. And, and of course you have to understand too about the atmosphere that it has a lensing effect to some degree, in other words, it acts sort of like a lens, a magnifying lens, so that it can draw out objects closer. But whenever these people are confronted, they say, "Oh, it's refraction." You know, it's being refracted above the horizon, and you're seeing it. But refraction always turns objects upside down. They're not upright. If you was looking at, this is the Chicago sideline, it would be like that. And it's not. They're seeing it the way that it is, like this. And Rob Skiba's one, he went up there with a Nikon P900 camera, which is, the P900 and P1000 are true aspect cameras. They do not have fisheye lenses in them. Again, we'll come to this too, about NASA created fisheye cameras back in the 1960s to make it look like there's curvature. But with a real camera with just normal aspect lenses, everything's flat. And you can take these cameras, these P900 and P1000 cameras, and you can see for incredible distances. I mean, incredible distances, and see things that you should not be able to see if this right here holds true, this 8 inches per mile squared. If that is true, these objects on the other side of a bay or whatever, 15 miles away on a dock, on a ship dock there, you shouldn't be able to see them. They should be beyond down below the horizon. You should not be able to see these objects or whatever, but they can. The other thing is I've never seen water curve. Every bit of water I have ever seen is flat. I mean, it's flat. Yeah, it's got waves and all that in it, but it seeks flat and it seeks level. It always you can't tilt it or anything like that. If you do, it just pours off or whatever you tilt it on. So, I mean, just, you think about, these are just common sense, questions about, well, how would the water wrap around a ball? How, since water always seeks level. That means it's going to travel down a hill and go down, and it's going to get into a basin and fill it up and form a lake, and it's going to be flat. That's, it always seeks that. It seeks the lowest point, and it seeks to be level. I mean, they use water in what they call water levels because they always seek to be level. Okay, and then the other question is, if the Earth is rotating at approximately 1,000 miles per hour, if I jumped up off the ground, the Earth, I can jump up off the ground and come right back down in the same spot that I jumped up off of. Well, if the Earth, again, I'm just using, some common sense thinking here. It seems to me, if I jumped up in the air, while I was in the air, just in that little bit of time, that, a couple of seconds or whatever, that the Earth would move past where I'm at. Not to mention, that the winds would be unbelievable. An object spinning around at that speed, even though it's, this massive 25,000 miles in circumference, ball, according to the mainstream, so-called science falsely so-called. If that was the case, it would move past where you're at. And, and this is one of the things, that Dean Odell brings up. And, these are declassified documents that have been mined from the CIA and from the Defense Department, that documents from back in the 40s and 50s and stuff like that have since been declassified because, it's obsolete stuff, so they really ain't interested, don't have a fear of somebody getting technology or something that is the latest and greatest. But where they're asked, they go to a company, a defense contractor, a McDonnell Douglas or, Raytheon or somebody like that, and say, okay, we want you to make us a rocket or an airplane. And it will say in the documentation, this is assuming a flat non-rotating Earth. Now, why would they say that? Well, people say, oh, well, that's just so they can simplify the math. Well, I don't see as where the math is really an issue when you're talking about nuclear, talking about physicists and scientists and engineers. I mean, that's what they do, and mathematicians and stuff. That's what their job is to work very complex math. So, they would not have to assume a flat, non-rotating Earth. And the thing is if it was a rotating ball, you would have to do the math. You would have to do the math to account for the movement of the Earth and for the elevation and things changing over time. Because if I'm shooting a rocket like this and this ball's spinning around, I got to account for that. So, because if I want to hit a target and the target's here, when I launch this thing, now the target's over here. I got to make sure that this rocket can reach this target. So I have to calculate at the speed this rocket's traveling at over a curved Earth, that this rocket's traveling at, and the speed at which the object is moving. I have to calculate all that. So I can't just assume a flat, non-rotating Earth. I've got to take all of those factors into account in order to make sure that this rocket hits its target. Otherwise, it's going to be going on by. The only thing that they have to know is they have to know where the target is and if the target's moving. It doesn't matter about the Earth, because the Earth ain't moving. It's fixed and non-rotating. But the only thing they got to know is that the elevation that they're going to reach with their rocket, and how fast they're going to reach that target. And, and of course, in the early days when they were designing these things, I mean, most of the time these targets were fixed targets. They were, artillery and stuff like that they're shooting at. So they already know where it is. So they just have to triangulate it, and then just boom, right on to the target. They really didn't try to hit moving targets with, early rockets and stuff, because they just didn't have the ability to track the target with the missile itself. Now they got infrared and radar and stuff like that in the nose of these rockets that track, will lock on to a target and track the target and, right to it. But the reason I'm bringing these things up is because we have to understand that they know, and they know that the Earth is flat and non-rotating. And the same with space. They've never been to any planetary. They've never been to Mars. They've never been to the moon. They've never been to any of these things because they are in the aether. Okay, the aether is a medium up there above the first heaven. We're, the air that we breathe and where the birds fly and all that is the first heaven. Then the second heaven is the area above that, which has the sun, the moon, the stars, and, all in it. And it's a fifth state of matter. It has characteristics that are not known. They're just now beginning to begin to look into this fifth state of matter. It has behaviors and stuff that is not like anything else. And you can watch. I mean, they was some amateurs that launched a rocket here a few years ago. And the fastest and the highest that any amateur rockets ever went. And when it got to that second heaven, the aether, it hit it and it stopped dead. I mean, it like boom, and it hung there for just a little bit, and then it come back down. Because that aether, that medium that's moving around there, and people like Nikola Tesla. He understood what was there. He called it that, and it was called that up until Einstein. Einstein was kind of brought on the scene to try and debunk the aether and the flat earth too, because there was other scientists and all that had went up, Michelson Morley, they had went up in a balloon as far as they could go up, and they used some instrumentation, something they invented at the time to try to measure the rotational speed of the earth, and they couldn't measure it. The only thing they were measuring the aether. The aether is what's moving. It's a medium, and it moves around, and it's like I say, it's a different kind of matter, and it's ultra cold. I mean, it's almost absolute zero, and so these bodies are moving around in it. But we, even with the most powerful rocket ever launched, the Saturn V, they could only just go a little ways into the aether. They couldn't go very far into it. And they couldn't stay up there that long. In fact, the earliest satellites that were launched by the United States, Echo 1 and 2, they were balloons. I mean, if you're, and this is the thing. If, they claim they're going into outer space and that it's this really deep vacuum, like negative 17 torr, which is a really deep vacuum. No balloon could manage to stay intact in a vacuum, because the outside pressure would be so less than the inside pressure, it'd pop the balloon just as soon as it got out there. But yet, NASA created this Mylar balloon. I mean, in fact, they invented Mylar to make this balloon. And they made this balloon out of Mylar, and they had this little tiny ball on, satellite, Echo. And this balloon was 10 stories high. I mean, it was it was the biggest balloon I've ever seen. And I mean, they had it in a great big huge hangar that they used for these airships, these blimps. I mean, that's how big this balloon was. But it was a round spherical balloon, and it was inflated with a binary inflator. And what that basically means, they took two different chemicals, and when they mixed them together, it created a gas that expanded very fast, and it inflated this big balloon. And so they launched this thing up there, and they just nosed themselves into the aether. They weren't able to go into it. They just got the nose of their craft in there, and then they popped that module that had the satellite in it and that balloon, and they folded this balloon up in there into a ball, about that big, that was on top. And it's funny, you can go back and look at the old footage of these things. I think they were using these Thor Atlas rockets. And think about these names they use: Thor, Atlas, Apollo, Sirius. I mean, these are all false gods. But yet all, these programs, Columbia, they use all these terms, these names for all these different gods. And so, they sent this thing up there into the atmosphere, up into the aether, and they launched it in there, and it stayed up there for about 30 days. But that was only because of the gas in that balloon that was keeping it up there. But as it began to lose that, it came back down, and then they launched Echo 2. And so now all of these things that they do have up there that are in the lower part of the aether, they're suspended up there with balloons, or either they have to have some type of little reaction engines, that continuously push it back up, because there is some weightlessness there, because the atmosphere is very thin. It's just the atmosphere that kind of suspends stuff, kind of brings things down. The weight of the atmosphere, kind of tends to push downward pressure on stuff. But if you get up there where the atmosphere is really, incredibly thin, you got this dense layer of air here, and then you got the aether here, and then you got this little zone in there that will kind of help suspend stuff for a little bit, and it kind of just slowly comes back down. Well, if you're up in that area and you've got some type of rockets or some, those small rockets that just keeps pushing you back up, and then every little bit they got to come back up there and recharge those fuel tanks or whatever. But not only that, I mean, there's a company that makes these balloons for these satellites, and they admitted that they sold the government tens of thousands of them. They had orders for tens of thousands of these balloons. Well, I think they were going to Elon Musk because he's putting all of those, Skynet or whatever, satellites up there, them little small satellites. But when they send them up, there's hundreds of them at a time, and they're just little small satellites that, but they got balloons on them to help keep them up there. And whenever they start coming back down, they got planes that fly around all the time and capture them. That when they come down, they capture them, they bring them inside, they reinflate them, and then they let them back up. And that's how they keep satellites up there. And then another thing you can look at is that there are thousands of undersea communication cables going between all of the inhabited areas of the world. Thousands of them. And I mean, these are big cables. I mean, these things are huge. And they're full of fiber optic cables. Well, if you got all these communication satellites up there that are capable of doing all this stuff, why do you need thousands and thousands of undersea cables? Because most of the communications is going on under in those cables, not from satellites. No, I think a lot of them satellites are more for monitoring than they are for anything else. They're just for watching what's going on down here. And that most of those that are up there now are being monitored through that space station, the International Space Station. It's just a monitoring platform for watching what's going on. And they're making a lot of these satellites that can be moved, to have little engines on them or whatever that can steer them around to where they want them at when they need them somewhere. But with that Skynet or StarNet or whatever it is that Elon Musk, he's putting up tens of thousands of these things. Well, that's so that they can be watching over the whole of the earth at all times, everywhere. And and then think about this. Think about NASA. Okay. NASA was founded by Nazis and Freemasons. Both occultic. I mean, the Nazis were heavily into the occult and had spent millions upon millions of dollars going around the world trying to find these so-called sacred objects like the Holy Grail and the Spear of Destiny and all these different things, different things that were mentioned in ancient writings and stuff like that. They were out looking for these things because they believed them to exist, and they believed that they had kind of, would give you access to power. And so, people don't do that unless they really, that they are convinced that it's true. They don't spend that kind of money. And on, and the Vril Society or whatever, which was, they were these women that had really, really long hair. I mean, 10 feet long. And that their hair acted sort of like a medium to communicate, and they would what they call auto write, where they would receive these, and it was demonic entities or whatever that were putting these things in their head and they would sit down and write out this stuff and draw out these drawings. That's how the Germans got elevated to such a high level of advancement with their military equipment in such a short period of time. I mean, in every area they were, had surpassed everybody else. I mean, the British and the Americans, in technology. So that's how they were getting this stuff. And so, so now you have these Nazis that after the war, in what was called Operation Paperclip, they brought like 1,600, 1,800 of these former Nazis over here and, put them in our top university labs, put them in, and they began to found NASA and, with Warner von Braun. And what's funny is that Warner von Braun on his tombstone, he's got Psalm 19 on there. We'll read that. But he also the lady that was his assistant. She's a doctor. I mean, got a PhD. He told her all kinds of stuff. That everything was a lie. Everything that we've been told about space and all that stuff was all a big decide. And it's funny, Warner von Braun and Walt Disney worked hand in hand developing the ability to create these, fantastical pictures that we see of when you see these images that they say, oh, this is, galaxy M81 over here, and they give you, this big swirling galaxy, all these colors and all that stuff. All that stuff is computer generated graphics. That's all that is. There ain't one bit, when they look out there, and that goes for you, for me, or anybody else, we can get a telescope and we can look out there and it looks the same. It's pretty much black and white. And there is a little color in there, the difference in some of the colors of the stars and stuff, but it all looks the same. There's no difference in the way it looks. They do that to just get people kind of like, wow, that's so great, man, look at that. And really it don't look nothing like that. And then a lot of times what they're showing you, that supposedly from like the Weber, the Webb Hub, the Hubble and the James Webb Space Telescopes and all that kind of stuff, that this is what we're seeing, but yet they can't even tell you where those things are at. Well, where is this Hubble Space Telescope? Where is this James Webb Telescope? Where up there is it at? Oh, well, we they can't tell you because it ain't up there. They still, if they have that kind of technology, why would you keep building terrestrial telescopes? I mean, and they're building one now. I mean, this thing is supposed to be, the most powerful one up until just recently was Mount Palomar. It had a 200-inch mirror in it, and so this one here is like 4 times that size. I mean, it's just a huge, huge telescope. And then they build these ones out here in Arizona on that, I can't think of the mountain out there, but it was a sacred place to the Apaches. And they put that Lucifer telescope up there, and guess who did that? The Catholics. So they're looking for something, through these things, but they're looking, there's certain entities up there that they're looking at, and they're getting messages from them or something. I don't know. But there's reasons behind this stuff. And again, Warner von Braun, a bunch of Freemasons, and of course these are secret societies. People say, well, how could they hide? They can't hide. How could a big organization like NASA be able to hide this from people? Well, first off, the Masons are highly secretive. Okay, but secondly, compartmentalization. You can have a guy working in a cubicle over here next to you, and he won't have no idea what you're doing. Because all you're given is just this one little piece of the puzzle to work on. This little, okay, I'm going to make this widget, this little valve or little switch or something like that, and I'm going to design it. But I'm designing it for this great big huge ship over here. Well, the only part that I'm given is just this little print, that's got a design for this switch on it, and I sit down and I figure out the math and materials and all that kind of stuff, but that's all I know about it. I don't even know what it goes in. What panel in that ship does that switch go in? I have no idea. And neither does that guy over there, because he's working on something else. So it's called compartmentalization. And it was a Mason that came up with it. A Nazi, or a Nazi. It was a Nazi that, one of them Nazis that came over there that worked with Warner von Braun that came up with the idea about compartmentalization. And the military picked up on it. They do the same thing. It's called need to know. You only are told what you need to know to do your job, and that's it. So, and then you've only had, supposedly, less than 500 people that's ever actually been into space, and they are all Masons. I mean, all of them. And you can watch people like Buzz Aldrin and different ones. They're doing the eye thing like that right there, And I mean, And when they go up there, they go on certain days, and they use a lot of numerology, 33 and 3, 6, and 9 and 666, and I mean all of these supposed like the speed at which the Earth is supposedly going around the sun, 66,666 miles per hour. But they put it down in so many, miles per second or so many kilometers per second. But when you do the math on it, it comes out to 66,666. And in the tilt of the Earth, and all that stuff, it all works out to 666. And I mean, so there's a method to their madness. And it's almost like they're putting it in your face and they're laughing about it. It's just like when they sent back supposed pictures of Pluto where a satellite went by Pluto. It actually had the face of Pluto the dog in it. The Disney dog Pluto. I mean, that's them basically telling you how stupid you are. If you think there's an actual picture of Pluto on the planet Pluto. I mean, and so they and they really have, and I was a victim of it too, of heliocentric cosmology. The reason they had to have heliocentric cosmology and a globe Earth and this big universe and all that stuff is that in order for these entities, when they show up, and they're going to show back up in Revelation, it says that Michael and his angels fought the dragon and his angels, and the dragon and his angels were defeated, and they cast back down to the earth. Well, if they cast back down here and they start showing up, well, I mean, what do you think? People, they're going to think it's an alien invasion or whatever, because that's what they have been programmed to believe. I mean, all of the, going back to the 50s with these science fiction movies, War of the Worlds, different stuff like that. They go, and getting ever and ever more realistic in the appearance of these, aliens, and their craft and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that ought to tell people something. That they are trying to form a narrative. They're producing a narrative so that when these entities do show up, and we're seeing it all over the world. People are seeing these craft everywhere. I mean, these so-called flying saucers and cigar-shaped craft and other kinds of stuff, pyramid-shaped stuff. I mean, and and it's more and more and more and more. So I think that we're getting ready to for that war to happen between them, and they're going to be cast back down here, and it says he comes down here having great wrath, and that's when they're going to start stirring it up. I mean, to try to go ahead and finish the job of destroying humanity. And that's why I think that this had to come about like that. I mean, maybe it's just speculation. It's speculation on my part, but that just kind of makes sense to me. And not only that, but on Tucker Carlson, on Fox News, he revealed, had all these different people from government agencies and stuff on there doing the soft reveal. Oh yeah, we've got, footage of unknown craft, we don't know who they are, and, from F-18s, out on the ocean. And I mean, over the years, I mean, there's been a bunch of stuff come out about, the Nimitz and different aircraft carriers being harassed by these things. And during World War II, the Foo Fighters, these globes that would show up in Korea, whenever they began to go into an area of Korea that they were not allowed to go, these things would show up, Vietnam, same thing. Certain areas of the world, I mean, where, because if you think about it, the East and the West have never had any kind of a big conflict, big war or anything like that between Eastern, Japan, yeah, but I mean, I'm talking about historically going back, there was always sort of this separation between the East and the West. So anytime, I think it was like Alexander the Great's armies was going into India, and they were going to try to take over India, and supposedly they were harassed by these craft or whatever, and their animals scattered and their men scattered, and they refused to go any further, and they went back to the Middle East and all, where the Greeks had a big presence. So, you see this stuff going on. I mean, where they were just, basically this is the line that separates the two, and you're not going there, until we're ready for you to interact, and like with the English and colonialism in India and stuff like that. But eventually they pulled out of there too. But nobody has ever really, the British twisted the arms of the Chinese a lot and used different things to coerce them, but they never really controlled China like they did, in India. That the way they did there. But so now these things are popping up all over the place. People are seeing them everywhere. And so the government's aware of it, that these things are, becoming more and more revealed, so they can't really lie about it anymore. So now they're starting to reveal it, and of course it's, again, this is not something that I can absolutely prove, but it's, people say that Eisenhower and different ones interacted with these fallen entities, and they promised our government, and I'm sure they did it with others too, if you will keep us, hidden and not, reveal us, we'll give you technology and we'll help you out, and we'll give you an advantage over your enemies or whatever. And then they're over there telling their enemies the same thing. You keep this quiet, and you keep the real true nature of the earth quiet, then we'll give you technology, and we're going to give you anything you want, and that's how Satan works, of course, is that, I mean, if you look at whenever Christ went into the wilderness there and was tempted, what happened? I mean, he was, Satan's offering him everything in the world, if you just bow down and worship him. Well, it's the same thing, they're going to offer these people anything they want as long as they'll give their allegiance to him. And for people that are scientists that want, the latest and greatest machine, or want to build the latest and greatest thing or whatever, but they need a ton of money, well, they'll give it to them as long as they keep their mouth shut. And every now and again, you have a whistleblower or somebody comes out, and they all, nearly every time they wind up, hung or killed. So, I mean, it's and like I say, when you look at who has, been the primary proponents of pushing heliocentric cosmology, it was all pagans. Sun worshipers. So they had, according to their religion and all that, they had to make the earth not be the center of everything. It had to be the sun, because that was what they worshiped. Okay, now we're just going to look through a few scriptures, and I'll, as always, I put them in the description box down there, so you can go look these scriptures up yourself and study them and do some research, about how, all the ancient cultures, I mean, from the Egyptians, the Hebrews, the Mesopotamians, the Chinese, the Indians, the Hindus, whatever, they all believed the earth was flat. I mean, they had the same kind of cosmology, but how it came about, and like with the Egyptians, they have a god that is depicted as the firmament. And of course, whenever you're going to start looking at something like this here, the best place to start is in Genesis, at creation. And this is the second day of creation. And it says, and Elohim said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. Now, I've had people try to say, oh, well, it's just talking about the clouds, clouds are water. I was like, well, yeah, but it's not talking about that kind of water. It's talking about water. When you just look at the context of the scripture there, let the waters divide the waters. Okay, so this firmament was fashioned in the water and had water, I believe that, just my opinion, but from the way it's described and all, that around the enclosure that we are in is water. I mean, there's like a vast, outside of our system, this enclosure that we're in, there's a vast body of, infinite body of water. I mean, I don't know that, but from the way it's described, that there's like an ocean up there where the Father is. He sits upon the firmament. His temple is on the firmament. His throne is in there. And so, and then around it is around all of this is water. And whenever the flood came, there was windows in the firmament that opened up, and water from that vast body of water dumped in. I mean, in the book of Enoch, he says he had a vision of torrents of water coming through out of the firmament. 7 of them, 7 different windows was opened up, and these torrents of water was filling up an enclosure. Well, an enclosure. Okay, and so, and then in Matthew 24 and Luke 13, he says the heavens will be shaken. Well, how can clouds be shaken? I mean, and the vast universe out there, how can that be shaken? No, it's talking about the firmament being shaken and actually breaking up. And I'll give you this, and you probably see it at Dean Odell and on Rob Skiba, a video of a group called Korn, called Coming Undone. Okay, and these are, pagans themselves, these rockers, they're Satanists. But these Satanists and these secret societies, they put this stuff right out in your face. It's sort of like there's this unwritten law that, they have to disclose what they are about. But they do it through symbolism. They don't tell you, they don't come out and tell you, but they do it through symbolism. Through these videos, through Hollywood. They are putting this stuff there, and they're telling you what it is. I mean, you see these movies, like The Flash, where he's running across this bridge, and he breaks through this glass wall, the firmament. And also, go and look up Operation Fishbowl and Operation Dominic. These were government operations back in the late 50s, early 60s. They were atmospheric nuclear tests, and they were trying to blow a hole in the firmament. And of course, it didn't even scratch it. The foolishness of these people, to attempt these things. But here, it says in the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And he called the firmament heaven. Okay, so he just, and he called the air, this part where we live at, a heaven as well. Shamayim is the Hebrew, Shamayim. And there's the first Shamayim, and and Shamayim is plural. It's a plural word. Anytime you see im on the end of a Hebrew word, it's more than one. It's plural, which means there's more than one heaven. There is the atmospheric heaven, there is the firmament, and then there is where the Father is above the firmament. the third heaven. You know, people make like, you know, that he's way off in a galaxy far, far away somewhere. No, he's not. He's right here. And it even tells us that he looks down here, you know, like looking through a looking glass, and the inhabitants of the earth are like grasshoppers. And he called it heaven. All right, and then we go over here to verse 14. This is the fourth day. And now check this out. When you look at the third day of creation, this is when all the trees and the plants and all that stuff were put here on the earth. Now think about that. All right. But it's the fourth day when the sun's put in the firmament. So he created all of the plants and the herbs and all that stuff on day 3. But he created the sun, the moon, and he took the sun and the moon and the stars and put them inside. And it says, and Elohim said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven. Again, there's that firmament of the heaven. To divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days, and for years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven, to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And Elohim set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and divide the light from the darkness. And Elohim saw that it was good. Now, what does it say here about the sun and the moon? That they are lights. They're not gas ball nuclear furnaces. They are types of lights. Just like that's an incandescent light bulb, the sun is a type of light, type of light bulb. And the moon is the same thing. And the moon is 7 times less light than the sun. The sun's 7 times brighter than the moon. And so you have these 2 lights put in there, and it says he placed the stars in the firmament. Okay, so they're in it. And and the luminaries, and they were given courses to follow. So they move on a course, and there was some that rebelled, that refused to follow their courses. That is the planets, the planets. And I think that was part of their deception, is to, you know, because if you think about these ancient peoples, they worshiped these planets: Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Venus. You know, they worshiped all these planets as gods. And they worshiped the sun as the chief god. Okay, and so they went around, they went down there, and they started moving around the sun to act as if they were it was a solar system, to give that impression. And but they're entities that are doing this. They went off there. They wandering stars is basically what planets means, but it's also where they get the word planet. But in the scriptures, where the word planet's in there, and it's only one place. The actual word there in the Hebrew is constellation. It's not planet. Okay, so we see here we've established that and what he calls the part where the air is, where the birds fly, is the open firmament. See, it's just an open firmament. But up there at the very top is a solid firmament. It ain't open. It's solid. And it tells us this in here. I mean, we're going to look here. It's Psalm 19, because actually, let's go to Job 38, 1 and 14 here first. Because here, this is after Job has gone through his trial, and now he's kind of railing against the Father, saying, why did you let this all happen to me? I was a righteous man, and of course he's like, who are you to be questioning me? So in chapter 38, starting at verse 1, it says, Then the Father, or Yahuwah, answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, Who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? Same thing as these, scientists, falsely so-called. I mean, it's basically become a religion. I mean, it is. It's a religion just like with Pythagoras and with Copernicus and, with the Romans and, sun worship, putting it at the center of everything. And, they will do anything to, and because of course too, they have a hatred of the Father, because they want to do whatever they want to do, without restriction. It says, Gird up now thy loins like a man, and I will demand of thee, and answer thou me. Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare it if thou hast understanding. How do you lay foundation for a globe? And see, this is one of the things they'll say, well, here, where it says, he hangs the earth on nothing. Well, the earth ain't hanging on nothing. They say, oh, well, see, that tells you right there, it's out in space, out there, where there ain't no gravity at. So it's just hanging out there. No, that's not what it's talking about. When you look around, you don't see no kind of cables or no kind of anything that's actually holding the earth up. That's because it's on foundations. It doesn't have, the earth is not supported by anything above. He's not hanging it on anything. It's sitting on pillars. It's supported on pillars, foundation pillars. And who hath laid the measures thereof? If thou knowest, or who has stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of Elohim shouted for joy. This is before man was ever even thought of. This was when it was originally made. Verse 1 of Genesis 1. In the beginning, Elohim made the Shamayim and the earth. Okay? That's when the foundations of it was laid. When you look at what it says in Genesis 1:2, it says, and of course it's misinterpreted there. Okay, let's go back there and I'll read it for you, because it's not what it says in the Hebrew. So, the King James, I believe, is a preserved word, and I believe it is the most accurately translated, but I believe it has a few little issues here and there. And it says, and the earth was without dark form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of Elohim moved upon the face of the waters. And when he moved upon it, then the land began to appear, of course. But right here, this here in the Hebrew is really says, but it became tohu wabohu. Okay, tohu wabohu means basically void and without a blueprint. There's nothing definable there. It became that way. It wasn't that way when it was created. It became that way. That's when the rebellion happened. That's when Satan, because there was a world here before the world that we are in now, before man was put here. And they rebelled, and there was a war, and all of it was destroyed. I mean, it was literally wiped out. Even the surface of the earth was gone. It was destroyed by a flood too. It was underwater, and as where with Noah's flood, the earth reappeared. In other words, they pumped the water out or whatever to get it back out of here. Because when you read the details about the flood, and I think it's in the latter part of Genesis 6, Genesis 7, it says that the windows of heaven were opened up and the fountains of the great deep, and it began to rain. And so those windows up there were opened up to allow them torrents of water that Enoch talked about came in, and then under the surface of the earth, under the earth itself, is the great deep. I mean, there's water down up under us. There's the foundations that go down. There's those foundations that come off of the bottom of the earth, and they go down and attach down to the bottom of the enclosure. And there's water down there. It just would be like, coming down, the earth's up here, a big platform like this, and it's got columns or whatever going down and attaching down to the bottom of this enclosure, and then that enclosure is filled in with water under there to kind of give it some buoyancy so it don't want to just collapse in, and it can withstand, shaking around and all that. But then on the edge around here, you have an ice wall, Antarctica, that goes around. And the firmament, which is like a dome, that comes down and it meets the wall of the enclosure. It meets it, and then that ice is kind of sealing all that. But it also is a barrier to keep people from over there, because we don't really know what's beyond that ice wall. I mean, yeah, there are government people that do, because they've done expeditions down there. Why do you think they have the Antarctic Ice Treaty that they signed back there in the 50s, forbidding anyone from being able to go to Antarctica? And if you tried to get permission to go down there, and they did give you permission, you could only go to certain places that they would allow you to go. You could not just go where you want. And if you told them, well, I want to go, over to this particular area there, you would never get a permit. And you got to go through every country that is a signature of that treaty, which is most of the world. You would have to get a signature giving you the right. And then you got to get all of these permits, and you got these. There was a guy I watched a video, and he went through all of the steps you would have to go through to get permission to go to Antarctica, and it is unbelievable, the red tape. You would never get there, and it would cost you millions and millions of dollars to file these fees to submit these, permits. So why, if Antarctica is a little continent down there, down in the southern hemisphere, what's the big deal? I mean, there was an admiral, and you can look this up. This is, well documented. I mean, these are not things I'm just pulling out of my hat, I mean, these are things that are very well documented. He was a British admiral that went on an expedition to find the edge of Antarctica. He wanted to sail around Antarctica. And the man sailed for 60-some thousand miles, and he never came to the edge of Antarctica. I mean, so that ought to tell you, and this was a respected admiral, this was in like the 1890s. I mean, and Admiral Byrd, and I think that's one of the reasons, I mean, he didn't live to be very old. I mean, I think he died in like his 50s or something. He was talking too much. he was talking about what he found up in the Arctic up there. There's an opening up there that will lead you down into this huge underground area where there's a city down there. Sheol. But so you have these places like that. They know about them, and in fact, go to Google Earth and get it to zoom in on the Arctic, and there'll be a black circle there over the very center of the Arctic. Why are they blocking it out? Because supposedly there's a mountain there that tallest place on Earth, way above, way taller than Mount Everest and K2, and it's a magnetic mountain. That's why all compasses, no matter where you go, I don't even care if you go down to South America or down to so-called Antarctica. Compasses always point north. Well, it looks to me like once you got below the equator to the southern hemisphere, that everything would point to the south if there's another pole there, another magnetic pole. The southern magnetic pole looks like it would be a reversal, that all compasses would point south. But they don't. They all point north because there is only one magnetic pole. It goes through the earth, down. So the southern pole is down, not south. I mean, it's just funny. I mean, when you start really thinking about some of this stuff that you've just kind of assumed or believed, been told all your life, and then you begin to start thinking about it, why is that? I mean, you would think if we're on this globe and you got a north and south magnetic pole, that once you got so far below the equator in the southern hemisphere that the compass would, point south. That would be the dominant direction that the compass would point to. But no, it doesn't. It still points north. I mean, that's, these are the kind of questions I ask, myself. It's funny. Just up until probably about 5 years ago or so, when I began to look into this, it kind of began, I'd heard about it, before that, but never paid it much mind, I was like, a bunch of, morons or whatever. But just all of a sudden, boom, this, it's like a voice said, listen to this. Listen to him. Listen to, just listen. Because, I'd seen the videos of Rob Skiba and other flat earth people. And I was like, man, I'm not watching that. That's, these people are crazy. The earth is a globe, And I mean, I believe that. Because that's what I was taught. We've inherited lies, as Paul says. We've inherited lies. And a lot of them. A lot more than we realize. And it's coming apart, because the scripture tells in the last days all things are going to be revealed. And it's being revealed. Just like this. But they are hanging on, like a cat with claws hanging on to something, for all their worth, to keep it from coming out. But again, these occultists, these Satanist people, they put it out there in your face, and they're laughing at us the whole time, thinking about how stupid we are because we believe all this stuff that they've fed us. When you really begin to think about it, it just doesn't make any sense. And so, and there's another, the movie Skyfall, James Bond movie Skyfall, and I don't encourage people to listen to the lyrics of these songs and stuff like that. Video corn, I turned the audio off on it, but I watched the video, and just look at it. Like I say, don't listen to it, the words, because they are demonic. But look at the video, and it's kind of interesting. It's called Coming Undone. Then this Skyfall, the theme song is called Skyfall, and it's talking about these people being standing tall at skyfall, when the sky comes coming down, when it begins to break apart and come down, when the firmament starts breaking up and coming down, and it says it'll level cities all over the world. Okay, now, and it's, they're saying we will stand tall. This is these rebellious people that are going to be coming to fight against him. When the Messiah returns, they're going to turn to fight against him. And that's what this song is talking about. But most people don't get it. And like I say, you look at these movies. I mean, they show, there's one movie, I can't remember what the name of it is, but it's this big dome with a flat earth, and it's in, like in space, but ours is not like that. It's in water. And we don't know what's outside of it. I mean, we have no idea what is, up there where the Father is in that expanse outside of that. We just don't know. They don't tell us. But in humans, we're not going to be in heaven. Nowhere does it say we're going to be in heaven. It says that the earth is our home. This is, we're going to be here on the earth. But it's going to be remade because it's been so defiled by Satan and his attack on Elohim's creation. But this is the gist of it, is that they are telling you this stuff, and it's coming out because they can't, like I said, they sort of like some kind of a law or rule that they have to, tell you what they're doing, what they're up to. What the real deal is, but they just don't tell you in words. They just do it through symbology and through these movies and stuff like that. And but there you have Job talking about it, and then you go to Psalms here, Psalm 19. This is a Psalm of David. The heavens declare the glory of Elohim, and the firmament showeth forth his handiwork. Now, what I want to do here is I went and looked up the word firmament, and I looked it up in the concordance, in the Hebrew. Okay, well, first I want to show you these ones here, that the Hebrew knew the difference between a ball and a circle. They had words for both. Okay, and a circle is a two-dimensional flat object. It's a flat plane. Okay, it's not a ball. There's a difference between a globe and a circle. All right, this is 23:29, and this is the word for a circle. 23:29 in the Hebrew definitions. The word is chug. Whenever they have an H and a little dot under it, it's like a CH sound, like chug, chug. Even though it's spelled H-U-G, you think it's hug, but it's chug. All right. Circle. Horizontal circle. Horizontal. Flat. Circuit. Around a circle. Compass. All right. Then you have the definition for a ball is dur, and it is 1754. Dur. All around. Around. That's all around. Any direction you're going around. Encircling ball. Ball. Round about. Okay, so the Hebrew knew what a ball was. Okay, now, and the reason I'm giving you that now is because I want to show you a scripture here in Isaiah. Let's see. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 21, starting at verse 21. Have ye not known? Have ye not heard? Hath it not been told you from the beginning? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are as grasshoppers, that stretcheth out the heavens as a curtain, and spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in. Stretcheth out the heavens. And spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in. So if you look at the ancient, tents are not like what we think. In the ancient days, they were domes. They were dome shaped. They wasn't these pointed things with the points on the corners and stuff. Yeah, there might have been some like that, but most of them were more something like a yurt. I mean, they were domed. And so, stretches it out like a dome. All right, so, and the surface of it, like back there in Job, let's see. All right, and it says there in Job, or who shut up the sea with doors when it brake forth, as if it had issued out of the womb? When I made the cloud the garment thereof, and the thick darkness as a swallowing band for it, and break up for it my decreed place, and set bars and doors, and said, hitherto shalt thou come, but no further. In other words, he put boundaries on the waters. Hath thou commanded the morning since thy days, and caused the day spring to know his place, that it might take hold of the ends of the earth, that the wicked might be shaken out of it? It is turned as clay to the seal, and they stand as a garment. In other words, the surface of the earth is like a seal, a signet ring. Like kings used to have these signet rings, and they would take and put wax, what they call sealing wax, on a scroll or whatever, and then they would take their ring and they would push it into it, and it, and I don't know if you've, familiar with what, but look one of them up, and you'll see the way that they form. They roll up on the edges like that right there, and they're round, and you can see surfaces and contours in it. That's the way the earth is. It's just like as if you took a seal ring and you push it down into it. Another thing you think about, when the Messiah returns, it says the whole earth will see him at his return. How could that be possible on the globe? Well, people say, it'd be with communications. People will be able to see it on CNN. I don't think so. I think after all of the catastrophes that have happened, after the war, over half of mankind will have been killed. I mean, I don't think there's going to be any lines of communications or CNN left. that stuff will have all been destroyed. No, the reason that the whole earth will be able to see him is because we're on a flat plane. And when he comes back from one end of it to the other, people will be able to see him. And he talks about the four corners of the earth. How does a round ball have corners? There are corners on this. I believe that it's like some kind of a square enclosure that's sitting on the bottom of that great big ocean or whatever it is of water that surrounds us. Sitting there. It's like a bowl. And it has, places down there where water can be pumped in and pumped out. Drains in it that can be shut up. Well, it's just talking about shutting it up and all that stuff. And then the columns, the foundations come down and attached to that. Then the surface of the earth is on top of that. Maybe sort of like that with the earth laying on top of it. And then there's, all around down in there is water, and there's a chamber down in there, called Tartarus or whatever, the heart of the earth, where the demonic entities get sent in chains of darkness and stuff. But they're down, Sheol, whatever, down there. And then around and it's like I say, it's like a bowl shaped, but sort of a box on the outside, the enclosure. Then it's a bowl in that. You can pour it like concrete or something, with a form around it and all. And you got a bowl in there, and the foundations of earth, and then there's a wall of ice that goes around, and then you have this dome that goes over that's made out of some kind of metallic crystal. Because it's described as, like metal, Ezekiel says the awesome crystal, or, the terrible crystal. Because he saw it. It's because we can't really see it down here on the earth because it's, it's estimated to be something like 600,000 feet to the top. But nobody's ever been there. And he tells you, if you can search out the top of the firmament or the foundations of the earth, I will forsake Israel forever. Well, he's not going to forsake us because nobody can search it out. It's just, nobody can get to the top because of the ether. And nobody can get to the bottom because we've drilled like 8 miles down, and it was almost impossible to do it. That's the deepest. And it's funny that when they went to Antarctica and come back, all these countries went down there, and then they come back and they signed that treaty and all this stuff. And they done it all in a hurry. And then they began to drill these holes in the earth to see how deep it was, and they began shooting these Thor Atlas missiles up there trying to blow a hole in the firmament. And they started out at something like with a 1.5 megaton bomb and went all the way up to like 14 megaton, which was the biggest they had. That's the most powerful hydrogen bomb they had. And they done this for like 2 years, from like 1960 to almost to 1962. And so, they're doing all this stuff, trying to see what this is made of and if it can be breached. And so you see what it says there in Isaiah, stretched out like a tent to dwell in. Now I'm going to show you the definitions of the word firmament. Now, firmament comes from the word firmamentum, which is Latin, which comes from the word in Greek stereos. Okay, and I think I've talked about stereos before, but and then you have the Hebrew word, which is rakia, and I'm going to go here. This is the Hebrew 75. Let's see. Wait a minute. Let's see. 7554. Rock. Then you have 7549, expanse of the sky or heaven, the space above the earth that holds visible objects, clouds, planets, stars, firmament. That's 7549. And then you got references here that you can go down and look at, like 7554, which is telling you the kind of the root word that it came from, that rakia comes from. It comes from raka. It's spread out, stamp upon, trample, to hammer out thin, overlay with precious metal, to be hammered, be beaten, beat, make broad, spread abroad, spread forth, spread into plates, spread out. So, I mean, it's to be hammered out like metal. Like if you took a big sheet of, heavy piece of metal and you started hammering it and you begin to thin it out, and then you start spreading it, shaping it like into a dome or to a bowl. It's the same concept. This is what it's talking about. Well, you don't hammer out clouds, I can tell you that. And that's they just, the firmament's just talking about the clouds and all that kind of stuff. No, no, you don't hammer out clouds in the thin metal, and it's talking about metal, hammered out metal like metal. So, this dome is a metallic crystal. Something that we don't have a clue about. And it's funny. They found some rocks or some they don't even really know what to call it, but it's they found it over there like in the Middle East or somewhere, and it's blue, real bluish color, and it's just made up of it's like 70% oxygen or something, and they don't know where it come from. There's nowhere on Earth that they've ever found it, like in deposits or in mining or anything. Never. It's all just laying on the surface, and people speculated that it is pieces of what was left over of the firmament whenever it was made, or even during that first that rebellion during the first Earth age. That it might have got damaged or something in that war, and pieces of it were left. But whenever the Messiah comes back, it says that it's going to roll back like a scroll, and pieces of it are going to be falling down, and they're going to be like the size of millstones. And I don't know if you know about millstones, but we got some right over here on the corner, right out here by the road over there, that probably weigh about 3,000 pounds each. I mean, they're huge. They're 6 feet across and that thick stone. Come from an old grist mill down here. So you can imagine 3,000 pound chunk of the firmament coming down and hitting something. I mean, and like I say, look at that video of corn. You see exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly what's going to happen. And then we have the Greek word here. Which is stereos. And I've talked about this word before. It is 4733 in the Greek. 4733. Stereos. Solid, strong, standing, firm, steadfast. So, stereo, to become strong, be strengthened, stereoma, firmness, steadfastness. So, air ain't firm. So, because they just try to say, it's just talking about the atmosphere and all that stuff. No, no, it ain't. It ain't talking about that. It's talking about an actual structure that is we're like inside of a big terrarium or a big, for lack of a better term, a controlled environment. And in the book of Enoch, he talks about these portals and where the weather is controlled. Basically an environmental control system. There's 3 portals to the north, 3 in the east, 3 in the south, 3 in the west. The cardinal directions. I'm not talking about a globular. I'm talking about like the cardinal points of a compass. That there is these 3 portals in each one that, depending on which one that the air is coming out of, determines what kind of weather you get. And one of them, there's one that has locusts that come out of it. The kind of locusts that eat plants. So whenever he wants to send the locust plague, he just blows these locusts out. Because the funny thing about locusts is you won't see one nowhere, won't hear nothing about locusts or plagues or anything like that, and just boom, out of nowhere, they appear. And so, he blows them out, and they, from whichever one direction that he wants to send them from, and blows them out. And then once they get started, and then he's got a way he can just turn them off whenever he's done plaguing somebody, or if he don't want the plague to reach somebody else, if he just wants to contain it in a certain area, well, he created them. He can turn them on and off. It's just that simple. Same thing with viruses and bugs and bacteria and stuff. And I think that human beings have kind of learned how to do that. I think that they can take, but I think that it's going to backfire on them, playing around with these viruses and bacteria and stuff, trying to, get gain of function where they're trying to make them more virulent. I think that they can, they probably figured out how they can turn them on and turn them off whenever they choose through epigenetics and stuff, because they've come a long ways in that stuff, and I don't think they tell us just how far advanced they are in it. I think they just tell us what they want us to know about it, and that's it. And human beings, it seems like no matter, whenever we get a technology, we always got to push it to its most destructive end, just the way it is. And I'm surprised, I won't be surprised if we don't start seeing chimeras and stuff, and they probably already are. People are advocating for it. They're advocating for taking a human and crossing them with a monkey and creating a chimera from it, saying that it's to, so repulse people that they will, be totally against doing anything like that anymore. But I don't believe that's what the purpose is. I believe they just want to see what will happen, and they'll do it. But and I got a few other scriptures here. 2 Peter. Well, Ezekiel. In the likeness of the firmament upon the heads of the living creatures. We've done this in the last video where I talked about Ezekiel having this vision when he was over there by the river Kibar, and he saw the firmament, and he saw these cherubim down below it, and they had these wheels, and wherever the wheels went, well, it's probably some kind of craft or something that they were moving around in. And he just described it by, what he could reference it to in his time. And then above it, above this awesome crystal, he saw a throne and a likeness of a man on it. And then in Revelation, 2 Peter, first here in Matthew, chapter 24. Let's see. And then then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of... I got the wrong one there. Let me look here. I got my verse mixed up there. It's Matthew... about the heavens being shaken. Here we go. Immediately after the tribulation of those days and after the tribulation is the day of the Lord. Tribulation will last about 2.5 years, and then there'll be these signs, these heavenly signs, and there'll be a lull, sort of a little silence in there. And then the day of Yahweh. It says, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Well, how can you shake heaven? I mean, and it talks about a great earthquake and all that stuff too, that shakes the entire earth. If the earth is shaken by this incredible earthquake, then that dome, which is attached to it, is going to shake too. So that's how the heaven is going to be shaken. And then it's also in Mark, same scripture basically. Let's see. Mark chapter 13. We got to write them down a while ago. Oh, here we go. And the stars of heaven shall fall, and the powers that are in heaven shall be shaken. And the other thing is the stars. If stars are what we've been told, that they are these giant nuclear, fusion reactor gas balls, giants, that are just furnaces that are being generated from these nuclear fusion cores. Well, if one of them fell to the earth, there wouldn't be no earth left. No. And the stars and the sun, they try to say, the sun is just a star. Well, no, it's not. The sun is a light. Stars are different. It makes it clear that they're different. It delineates between them. The sun, the moon, and the stars, they're different. The stars are entities. They're being moved by entities. When these stars come down, I believe they're entities that are coming down, that are falling down here. But anyhow, the only other thing I got about that is in Revelation. Well, I had 2 Peter. I meant to look at that too. Forgot to put my marker in there. 2 Peter, chapter 3, verse 10. Chapter 3, verse 10. First Peter there. All right, here we go. But the day of Yahweh will come as a thief in the night, in the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up. So how can the heavens pass away with a great noise? I mean, if it's just the atmosphere, how could that be? That means that the firmament itself is going to be destroyed and a new one made. But before that happens, before it's made, it talks about the New Jerusalem and all that stuff coming down after the new earth and new heaven and all that stuff. And this is in Revelation chapter 20, or 21 rather. Chapter 21 and verse 1. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from Elohim out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. So, you know, whenever you listen to what they're saying here, I mean, you begin to see that none of it sounds like a globe to me. And you know, again, like stuff like the Northern Star, you know, the Polaris. I mean, it never moves. It stays in the same place all the time. You know, I think it's one of the stars that's at the tail end of the Big Dipper. And it's like the Dipper moves around like that, but that star there, it never moves. And, you know, and another thing I've noticed too about the sun, and you know, I try to be kind of an observant person, you know, as far as looking at the sky at night and looking at the, you know, position of the sun. Well, the sun has moved its position. It's not in the same place that it was a few years ago. Because I watch how it comes up. I mean, where our little store is, this is, you know, there's a road right here, and the sun always used to come up in the morning over and go over like that. The west was that direction, the east this direction. Now it's coming up like this. East is this way and the west is that way. Well, you know, if we were on a globe and the earth, the earth moved to allow for the sun to change its orientation, and I've even seen YouTube videos of farmers that one farmer in particular up in Michigan, he had these little solar panels set up to catch sunlight to keep his electric fence going. And he said he had to move his fence, solar panels, he had to move them because the sun wasn't coming up in the same position anymore. And another thing to look at is that the sun is white now. I mean, the output is white. It ain't yellow anymore. It was of a yellow color. Now it's a bright white. That, I think, is because the sun can change its output and the spectrum of its light. It ain't, you know, I mean, you know, it's just because it's controlled. It's controlled just like everything else is. I mean, Christ, it says that Christ says everything is controlled and held together by Him. He holds it all together and He controls all of it. Well, that tells me that we're living in some kind of, you know, a controlled in space, a controlled environment. You know, it just, you know, what we've been told don't add up. And, you know, when I began to, not just studying the scriptures, but just looking at secular history and things, you know, like I said, you know, the Anunnaki, you know, which were probably just Anakim, which were Nephilim. It's like I said before, it depends on the language you're hearing it in, I mean, as to what they're called. But they're talking about the same entities. It's just that, you know, the language they're using is different. But anyhow, that's, you know, kind of my take on it. You can do with it whatever you want. You know, I don't try to shove it down nobody's throat, but I think it's a good subject to get people to thinking, you know, and you kind of really get to thinking about how we're being deceived and, you know, this great deception that the scriptures talks about, how, you know, He deceives the whole world, and, you know, that people, because they would not receive the truth, they're given over to a strong delusion to believe the lie, this strong delusion, and I think this is a part of it, and that it's being, you know, planned for a long time and implemented for a long time, and now it's starting to come to its conclusion, and you know, and people say, well, what does it matter whether we're on a flat earth or whether we're on a globe? Well, I think it matters when it comes to truth. It matters that, you know, the Father told us this for a reason. I mean, He, you know, he's you know, let us know how it is, and that it does matter. I mean, whenever you look at the other heliocentric, it's worshiping the sun, Satan. So that's what it boils down to. So it does matter. And I just hope can challenge you to do your own homework, do your investigating into it, and see what you come to. And I mean, I just wanted to throw this out here, sort of just as an exercise to get people to thinking and see what you think about it, and see if you can pick up on their lies and their deception. It'll help you in the long run to have discernment. And so with that, I love you folks. I appreciate you joining me and watching my videos. If you want to subscribe, please do, or you don't have to. I don't do this for any of that kind of stuff. I do it to try to get people to think and use some critical thinking and to learn the truth. And you can find the truth if you seek it. And if you have your heart into it, to really desire to know the truth. A lot of people don't want to know the truth because then it makes them accountable. But anyway, I love you. I hope you will be blessed. And I'll see you again next week, if Yahuwah willing.